Good morning, Bucknutters. Welcome to the Bucknuts Morning 5 here on Monday, November 27th, 2017. I am Dave Biddle, and I'm very happy to be joined by Patrick Murphy. Patrick, I can't believe I'm going to start the show talking about this Greg Schiano stuff. There's so much to talk about, but the Schiano situation is overshadowing everything. I turned on the debut of Golic and Wingo on ESPN2 this morning. It's the first thing that they're talking about, at least, when I woke up. It was the main thing they were talking about. For those that don't know, I'm sure pretty much everybody knows, Greg Schiano, Ohio State defensive coordinator in Tennessee, had an agreement he was going to be their new head coach. Then a mob led by, really was started by Clay Travis, under the guise of they were concerned about that Schiano might have known something about Jerry Sandusky while he was at Penn State many years ago. I think that was complete BS. I think they just did not want Greg Schiano as their head coach, and amazingly it worked. Tennessee backed down. They backed out of the contract. What do you make of this whole Schiano situation, Patrick?
It's ridiculous. Yesterday I'm doing the Big Ten Championship Coaches teleconference with Coach Meyer and Coach Chris, and then there's the Ohio State basketball game. So I'm on social media and kind of getting texts, but also busy, and I'm seeing this stuff sort of filter in that Schiano's going to go, and you're happy for him, and then all this other stuff starts to bubble up. Once I finally was done with the basketball game and done with the teleconference stuff and could kind of look at it, I was just amazed at what had come out. This stuff that connects him back to Sandusky when he was 25 years old. That's 26 years ago. He's 51 now. This was his first coaching job, and going back and looking at it, which I don't believe many people who were a part of this mob, as you talk about, including Clay Travis, who has made fun of the mob mentality before. Going back and looking at this Dan Wolken piece that on USA Today that he put out, saying that back when the Sandusky stuff all came out, he calls it Schiano's connection to it is laughably thin. He says in 2015 deposition, a former Penn State assistant, Mike McQuarrie, said he briefly spoken with another former Penn State assistant, Tom Bradley, about rape allegations involving Sandusky. McQuarrie went on to say that Bradley told him another assistant, purportedly to be Schiano, not even confirmed, who had left Penn State 9 years before McQuarrie started there, had once claimed to see Sandusky doing something inappropriate, a claim Schiano and Bradley both denied. So this is where this is all coming from, and it's a second-hand account that wasn't ever considered good enough to follow up on. Since then, Schiano has had multiple head coaching jobs, including at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, which is, an NFL organization. Urban Meyer and his staff have hired him to do and did their research on it. So, to try and claim that this has anything to do with something that happened 26 years ago blows my mind. Tennessee fans are living in the past. They got this idea in their head that they were going to get a guy like John Gruden, that they were going to get John Gruden or a coach like John Gruden, and that was never going to happen. Probably the coach that considered them the most is Dan Mullen, and he decided to go to Florida, which is a place that he has roots, having coached there under Urban Meyer before. So, I think they needed a reason to hate on this Greg Schiano hiring. And while, I don't know how Greg Schiano will do as a head coach somewhere. It's been a long time since he's been a head coach, much less a head coach of college football. I don't see Tennessee getting anyone better before this happened. And now, after, seeing how they treated this coach that, could have come in and probably helped to start turning the program around, I'm not sure what they're going to do. It's going to be very interesting to see who accepts this head coaching job at some point, and who even is making the hiring, because the athletic director there has obviously had this colossal screw up on his hands, and now he's got to answer for that to any head coach he approaches. So, it blows my mind that fans were able to do this. I mean, I guess it shows the power of fans in this day and age with social media and whatnot, but it's unfortunate for Schiano, and I know there's a lot of, now Ohio State's going to have to react. Ohio State already, hired Schiano. They know what happened with Schiano's past. They've done their research, and they're happy with him. I expect nothing to come out of this from the Ohio State side, except they get to keep their defensive coordinator for a little bit longer, which I think is only going to be a good thing for the Buckeyes as they head into the Big Ten championship game. And whether it's a bowl game, whether it's a college football playoff, they don't have to worry about a guy either leaving before they're done or, going back and forth, at least for now. We'll see what else happens.
Yeah, very well said. And, I saw Bill Simmons put on Twitter, it's very scary what happened to Greg Schiano yesterday, and I agree with that.
Yeah.
It's terrible. It's awful. We can use all these different words, but I think scary is a good word to use, where you can get this under a false pretense. Again, under a false pretense that you can basically lie and say this is the real reason we don't want him is because we don't want anybody that had any connection to the raping of children in our program. And first of all, again, there's, as you pointed out, that was like third-hand hearsay, and Schiano denies it ever happened. Bob Bradley denies he ever, or excuse me, not Bob Bradley.
Tom
Bradley, thank you. Not former U.S. men's national coach Bob Bradley. Tom Bradley also denies that Greg Schiano ever said anything to him. So there's not even any proof that happened. And then the fact that you can just lie about that and say, that's why we don't want him, when they don't want him because they don't think he's a good enough coach. You're right. They had these, delusions of grandeur that they were going to get, John Gruden or someone of that ilk. But let's push it forward. It's just terrible and it's scary what happened with Schiano. But now what do you think is going to happen? I tend to think, because people said, well, now he's toxic, he can't be hired as a head coach. I think Tennessee just looks like idiots here. They're the ones that listen to the fans, listen to this mob mentality, again, under false pretenses they listened to it and backed out of it. I still think another program of that stature eventually will hire him. I don't know if it'll be this offseason. Just give me your take on that. What do you think is going to happen with Schiano? You think he's going to be at Ohio State for a few more years? You think someone's going to hire him this offseason, next offseason? What's the future hold for Greg Schiano, Patrick?
I do think he'll find a head coaching spot. Like you said, it may not be this offseason just because I think a lot of the coaching spots that he may have looked at are getting filled or have already, started vetting guys and whatnot, and he seemed to be off the list yesterday. So, it may be another year at Ohio State for him. Maybe another job will come up. There obviously are still some available. It just kind of depends what level he's willing to accept. But, obviously he had success at Rutgers, took that program to heights it hadn't been before, hasn't been since. That was a long time ago, and I know that. And obviously, he struggled with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and there's some questions about what all happened down there. But, we've seen head coaches in college football go to the NFL and fail before. Nick Saban is a prime example, and he's been able to turn it around coming back to college football. And then he comes to Ohio State, and the defense, for the most part, has been very good under his watch. There are some questions you can certainly make about linebackers this year and whatnot, but, for the most part, I think he's done his job. He's a guy that in our time talking to him, while he can be a little gruff, I think is the word, I think he, clearly understands football and, as a head coach, I think would be fine. So I do believe he'll end up somewhere. It may not be this offseason, like you said, but, that's only good news, I think, for Ohio State, because that means one less thing you have to deal with this offseason. If you can keep him in place, kind of keep the ship intact as you build towards 2018.
We'll chat with Urban Meyer today, here in just a couple hours, 11:45 a.m. We'll chat with Urban Meyer. I guarantee you this will be broached. We'll see what Urban Meyer says. So programming note, Urban Meyer today, 11:45 a.m. There's going to be plenty to talk about. And then we'll do Lunch Bucks today, probably around 1:30 a.m. We will be at the Bogey Inn, kind of Urban Meyer's home base there, Muirfield Village, Bogey Inn. Urban lives there. He likes to frequent the Bogey Inn about once a week, we hear, when he can, maybe not during the season. So we'll be at the Bogey Inn about 1:30 today for Lunch Bucks, so keep it locked for that. Plenty to talk about here before I let you go, though, Patrick. Let's move on.
Sure.
Ohio State, Michigan. Who would have thought that would be like the second thing I'd bring up 2 days after the game? And it wasn't exactly a mundane Ohio State-Michigan game. It's going to be one that we talk about for years. Ohio State down 14-0. So they have the largest comeback in the history of the rivalry for Ohio State, down 14. They're able to come back and win the game. But it's how they did it. J.T. Barrett initially leads them back to 14-all. Then Michigan takes the lead again. Denzel Ward blocks an extra point. It's 20-14. J.T. Barrett gets hurt, and we'll get into all the J.T. Barrett stuff. He re-injured his knee. Dwayne Haskins comes into the game. I mean, this is just stuff that just, books are made out of. He comes in the Ohio State-Michigan game. The Buckeyes are down by 6. What does he do? He leads them on a touchdown drive to take the lead and looks good doing it. I mean, he was put under the fire. I mean, it was like third down was the only time they were really letting him throw the football, and he was hitting his passes and just he was so poised. And then his second drive, what does he do? Leads them on a field goal drive. And he just keeps it going. They missed a field goal. Then he had another touchdown drive. I mean, what a way for Ohio State to win this game, have a redshirt freshman come in, look cool as a cucumber, and beat Michigan. When Michigan, I thought, was really playing above their heads for a lot of that game.
I certainly agree. Watching Michigan, I think they understood how big this game was for them early in that game. The emotion of Jim Harbaugh's third game, playing at the big house, as they're driving down the field, the sidelines are jumping up and down on that second drive. They were definitely into it, and I think it took a little while for the Buckeyes to kind of settle into that. I don't know if it was that I don't think they were looking past Michigan at all. I think this game is too big for that, but I do think they were overwhelmed a little bit by the expectation or by the energy and whatnot of that game. But to go to Dwayne Haskins, I think that was quite incredible. And talking to Urban Meyer yesterday on the teleconference, he made the comment that he thought it was important that Dwayne went through the week before, where he comes into the Illinois game, it's wet, and he fumbles that ball, has to be pulled from the game. Urban kind of gives him a chewing out on the sidelines, goes back into the game, kind of retools, repoises himself. I think that was a big moment for him because, fans have seen him do pretty well for the most part when he's been in kind of that mop-up duty this year. Then he comes into a game, the game's out of hand, but it's still not, the fourth quarter or whatnot, and has a big issue. There's a reason that your fourth-year starting quarterback doesn't fumble and your two backups come in with wet conditions and have trouble handling it. But he responds. He's ready for, this moment, comes in for JT. Like you said, they limited him a little bit, but when he needed to throw the ball, boy, did he throw the ball. That pass to Austin Mack on third down, third and long, where, you're trailing. This could be a big momentum swing moment if you guys don't pick up a first down or get down and at least get a field goal on this drive. And Dwayne makes a great throw, a great catch by Austin Mack, too, who, hasn't done a ton this year, but I think is a very good wide receiver for this team. Took a big hit, held on to the ball. And then Dwayne makes a great 22-yard run. I'm sitting in the press box talking to some of the guys there, and we're talking about how the offense needs to change with Dwayne. He's not the runner that JT is. And, then he busts off a 22-yard run where he said after the game he thought he'd scored. So, gets down to the 1-yard line, and they power it in with J.K. Dobbins. But I thought the offense, and Steve Hellwagon and I talked about this on Facebook Live after the game, I thought the offense went back to what it needs to be doing, what it did the last 2 weeks with the run game first with Dwayne in the game. I don't think you want to become so predictable that that you're only going to throw on third down, but it was too much JT running early on for me, and when they got to Dwayne and knowing that, he's not as much of a runner as JT, not as successful a runner, they went back to that run game, and all of a sudden you saw the offense really start to move the ball. I'm not going to say that if JT gets hurt, they don't win that game, because I think they do, but and we could get to JT in a second, but I think that had to change their offensive mentality. And it also allowed, when they did throw for a guy in a big arm in a windy stadium like that, to really let it go. And you saw the differences in terms of the throws for all three quarterbacks that played in that game. Dwayne clearly had the biggest arm. He was able to make the throws. And the fact that in that type of game, that big rivalry, that moment, he was able to put a couple throws on the money, 6 for 7 for over 90 yards, I think is pretty impressive. And, he's still got things to work on, but, future of Buckeye quarterbacking looks good. And I think one interesting thing that maybe got lost in the JT injury after the game was that Dwayne said he's known that he's the number 2 quarterback on this team since the first week. Now, a lot of that I think had to do with Joe Burrow's injury, but he's been the backup all season, and that's not something we'd heard before. Urban's always kind of said that him and Joe are even, at least publicly. But Dwayne's the number 2. Now, what will that mean going into the off season and heading into next season? I think there'll still be a quarterback competition, but they trust this redshirt freshman to be the backup even after Joe Burrow returns from that hand injury, which I thought was interesting.
So cameraman gate happened, just like another layer of intrigue in this game, and we didn't know about it until afterward. Everybody just thought JT got hurt on a run, and Fox was reporting, oh yeah, he's had this all year. He has a meniscus that occasionally just pops in and pops out. I don't know if there's any truth to that. I think that maybe a sideline reporter was giving some bad information there. Turns out he heard it before the game. I'm sure everybody's heard this, but again, if you haven't, JT's warming up before the game. It's tight quarters down there at Michigan Stadium. There's not a lot of room down there. If you watch the game on TV, you can see that people are always running into band members when they're down there. Well, JT was warming up, and a cameraman was trying to get through, and it sounds like it was an accident, but it sounds like a cameraman just kind of bumped into JT, and he bumped his knee into the cart, and that caused the meniscus to, I don't know if it popped out or whatever the right medical terminology is, but he injured his knee, was able to play. The whole thing is so intriguing because if Urban knew this, why were they running JT so much and all that? So that's another layer to this. But just your thoughts on that whole situation with this cameraman bumping into JT's knee.
Yeah, so from our perspective, we're up in the press box at the game, and JT goes down, gets up, kind of signals to the sideline, goes back down, they take him off. Obviously, he heads to the locker room, and obviously you think the worst, the flashbacks to 2014 and, what happened then. And as we're sitting there and Dwayne's, leading the team down the field and whatnot, it came to me that, and I know other people put this out there, that, they win this game, they're going to the Big Ten championship game against Wisconsin with the potential to play Alabama in the Sugar Bowl to go to the national championship. It just seemed like things were strangely similar to 2014. Then someone else also pointed out to me that TCU is sitting right there on the outside, and that was the team in 2014 that one of the teams that Ohio State jumped over to make it into the playoffs. So, that's kind of the thought process in the press box. And then, as I headed down to the post-game interviews, someone told me about the report by Fox about the meniscus and whatnot. And, having dealt with knee injuries myself, that's probably the best case news because you can handle a meniscus pretty easily. So we get down there, and Urban obviously makes his comments about, that it's his fault that this happened and the tight quarters, and everyone's trying to get kind of answers. And so finally JT comes in. JT, acts out what happened on the sideline, which I posted a video of on Twitter. And so we get sort of an explanation and whatnot. And JT went out to the hallway behind the press conference room, and I went out there with a couple other reporters. So we got to talk to him a little more intimately. And he explained in a lot more detail that this is something he's dealt with all season, that, it happened going as far back, and I don't know if it happened before this, but in the Indiana game. And what he's always been able to do is stretch out his leg, kind of hyperextended is what he said, and the joint, the whatever it is, the kneecap maybe, pops back into place. He's never had any issues beyond it. He's always been able to handle it himself. He said that, there was never even any reason to talk to trainers about it because he's always been able to pop it right back in. And he said that's what happened at the beginning of the game when, he's on the sideline, he gets bumped, it pops out. He has to go down and fix it, but he made the point, you guys didn't even know anything was wrong, which obviously we did it. As you said, he's running fine. The coaching staff didn't call the game any differently. He wouldn't even call it an injury. He said it's just something that happens. He said that he was talking to Cardale Jones, who was there on the sidelines, and Cardale had something similar occur while he was at Ohio State, ended up having his knee scoped to get it fixed, and, it was no big deal. So JT says he's going to play next week. Coach Meyer said yesterday that there's still some debate about that. They're going to talk and see how he does this week and what percentage he'll be throughout practice. But, from talking to JT, and I watched him walk up and down the steps on the stage, and usually going down the steps with something like that, you'd notice kind of a limp or whatnot. He didn't seem to have any sort of issues. And, he said he thought the biggest issue was that because it happened twice in one day, the knee was swollen. So the second time it just was too puffy to pop back in as easily as it usually does. But, I saw no ill effects before the second injury. watching him walk around and talking to him, he seemed to be in pretty good spirits, all things considered. So if I'm a betting man, I'm saying that, Ohio State has JT going into the game. Now, I do think you want to have Dwayne ready just in case something else happens, maybe something more serious. Obviously, this isn't supposed to happen to your knee, so you've got to be a little concerned that a hit to it will pop it out, further or cause other damage. But from what Dwayne showed in that game, I think you can be fairly confident in him, but maybe spend a little more time getting him some first-team reps, kind of game plan and offense to him this week. But I imagine JT goes out on Saturday against Wisconsin, and it's business as usual for Ohio State and the Buckeye offense.
So he's been dealing with this for pretty much the entire season. Now, just for clarity, he said he didn't tell the trainers. Did he tell his coaches? Did Urban know anything about this before the Michigan game that JT's been dealing with?
Urban said yesterday when asked about it on a teleconference that he knew that JT was getting treatment on the knee, but that it was never to the point where it affected his play. So obviously it was something that the Ohio State staff, medical staff, coaching staff knew about, but it's always been something that he's been able to handle pretty much on his own and then get treatment on it afterwards or whatnot. So yeah, I think, because it hasn't impacted the way he's played, obviously the coach or the training staff deemed that, it wasn't something they needed to have medically treated right away. It was something they could just manage throughout the year. What I imagine is that this is something that he'll have to have some sort of minor surgery on during the off season. Now what that'll impact is, the chance to go to a Senior Bowl, for instance, or, if he's invited to the Combine. Obviously he has ambitions on going pro and making it in the NFL. So that'll be interesting when we get to that. But yeah, it sounds like it's something that, like some injuries, and, it's football. Everybody's dealing with some sort of injuries throughout the course of the season. I think, it's something that they were able to manage, and it hasn't affected JT's play. I think we can all agree that some of the performances we've seen, both good and bad, I don't think his knee was the issue, if there was one. The knee didn't throw the interceptions at Iowa. The knee didn't hinder him from making the comeback against Penn State. So, I don't think it limited JT at all throughout the course of the season.
Before I let you go real quick, there's going to be people out there that are wondering, okay, even if JT is healthy, cleared to play, maybe he's not quite 100%. I mean, if it's popping in and out, you can't really say it's 100%. I don't know how close to 100 it would be. But he's medically cleared. He's able to play. There's going to be fans that say, we've seen enough of Dwayne Haskins. I know it's a small sample size. We now know he brings that different element to the offense. He can throw any ball on the field. What would you say to that fan that said, it should be Dwayne Haskins regardless? He should be the quarterback from now on. What would you say to a fan?
I would tell them that they should pump the brakes. Yes, we've seen some good things from Dwayne. We've also seen, bad interception, a fumble last week when it was wet. Now he won't have to deal with any sort of wet conditions, but, JT's also not going to have to be dealing with throwing in the wind like he was up at Michigan, where, I don't know if that was much of an issue, but, look at what JT did in that game. Down 14-0, he's able to bring this team back, get it to 14-14. I do think some of the reason that the offense was more successful when Dwayne got in, as I mentioned before, was the play calling went back to, the run game, the running back run game first, and then JT second. There was less read options because Dwayne's not as comfortable with making those decisions. So, I think we saw that against Michigan State. Obviously, that was very successful. We saw that against Iowa. Now, Illinois, and they could have probably run anything against Illinois. But I do think that you can't lose in all this. That JT brought this team back from 14-0 down against Michigan in the Big House, and scoring both touchdowns. He threw the pass to Marcus Baugh. They finally were able to get a receiver open, and using the play action to do so. And then the run for his touchdown was a big run because it had come after he just rushed into the end zone, and then it came back on a penalty. He nearly threw an interception, a very bad throw by JT, and then he keeps his poise, keeps things together, and gets into the end zone on his own. And from about 5 yards out, I think he was already celebrating. So he was pretty confident he was getting in there. I know people are very excited about Dwayne and what he has to offer, and I think they should be. But as long as JT Barrett's healthy, the Dwayne Haskins era as Ohio State's quarterback has not yet begun.
Great insights from Patrick Murphy on this extended edition of the improperly named Bucknuts Morning 5, more like the Bucknuts Morning 20 today. Thank you very much, Patrick, and thank you very much to all the listeners out there for tuning in to the show. I appreciate it, and hope you have a great day. Let's hear that Buckeye swag, best damn band in the land.